probably a better place for it.
Welcome. We're glad that you could be here. I think this will be a fascinating evening. It's something with Northwest Quarterly Magazine that one part of our mission is to be able to highlight the gems in our region, and this is certainly one of them. So what I'd like to do is introduce Chris Linden. He's our executive editor, and Dean Dr. Stagnaro Green, and then Madison Henley, who is a four-year student. Chris will dive in with questions. We'll have the Q&A, and I think it'll be a lively evening.
Great. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Dr. Stagnaro Green, and Madison as well for joining us tonight. I hope you found the tours enlightening and lively. We're excited here tonight to be at the University of Illinois College of Medicine, talking a little bit about the life of a medical school. We're bringing you inside. We've taken a tour, and now our journey continues as we undergo a little conversation about what happens at a medical school. Here at the Rockford University, there's a lot of things happening, a lot of cutting-edge medicine. Really, you're seeing the future of medicine taking shape here, as you're seeing literally the future doctors of America starting out here, and we're also seeing a lot of breakthroughs happening. So we're excited to take you inside on that journey this evening. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you for joining us tonight too. So getting started then, I want to start off, Dean Stagnaro Green. There are many facets, as we've discovered, about the University of Illinois College of Medicine. Of course, there's the medical school that you oversee. There's also a pharmacy school here on campus. There's a nursing school on campus, and there are many more things that we'll discuss tonight as well. What are a couple of those critical experiences that students have while they're here during their 4 years?
Well, 4 years is a long time, and the students have a tremendous number of experiences. I could share my perspective, and then I'll flip it over to Madison, who is living through it. I think the first part is just transitioning, transitioning from either an undergraduate student. So we have some students who come straight from 4 years of college, and then we have some students who are out for 1 year, or just spoke with a student who's out for 6 or 7 years. But transitioning from a person who's a lay person into the medical field is one of the most important things that happen. And that's not a transition that just occurs like that. It's something that takes time. You start becoming acculturated to the field of medicine. It's like learning a new language. It's learning different ways to interact with individuals. It's studying the professional components of being a physician, the ethical aspects, learning how to deal with the emotional aspects of dealing with patients who do well and who don't do well. It's learning how to share with someone the joy of childbirth and the pain of somebody's death. And all of that happens in medical school, and medical is split about 50-50. The first couple of years are here on this campus mainly, learning the basic sciences, learning the components of how to do a history and how to do a physical exam and have some patient interaction. And then in about March of the second year, students' lives shift dramatically. And they go into the hospitals, and they go into the clinics, and they go into practices, and they begin to function as part of a medical team. Now, as a third-year student, you don't have ultimate responsibility for anything because you're just learning. And you're exposed to various fields of medicine: pediatrics, obstetrics, psychiatry, internal medicine, surgery, family medicine, all during your third year. And we could talk about all the various things that the students might get involved in. And then you become a fourth-year student. And fourth year is a transitional year to that next stage of training. And the next stage of training could be anywhere from 3 to 7 years. So putting in perspective, you went to 4 years of undergraduate school, 4 years of medical school, you then become a doctor, and you're licensed to do nothing. You're then starting the next component of your training. You can't get a license at least till 1 year of your residency, but you usually do it from 3 to 7 years to train in pediatrics or obstetrics or surgery or internal medicine endocrine, which is what I did. So there's so many different things that happen along that time. And what happens with students is they slowly transition from that layperson into a medical professional. And that continues through their internship and residency and as they become physicians who are out in practice. So it's an incredible transitional process.
Great. Now,
Madison, I don't know if you want to comment on it.
I think you summarized it well. I think it's a transition period. It's taking on another identity, and that comes with challenges that may be augmented by prior experiences or other identities. But it's definitely a process that changes depending on the level that you're at. And you gain a lot of skills and experiences just from by being here and learning.
Madison, when in that third year, how much time do you spend in those different disciplines?
It depends. So our schedule here is typically 6 weeks for most of the disciplines, and then 2 months for internal medicine and surgery.
Okay.
But to put it in perspective, when a student spends time on surgery and do their 8 weeks, it's not that they come to work at 9 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You often have to be at the hospital probably before 6 to pre-round on your patients, to prepare for the rounds with the other with the residents and the faculty. You then may work another 10 or 12 hours learning how to take care of patients, interact with patients, scrubbing in on operations. You'll work on weekends, you'll work on some evenings. So I don't want anyone to think that it's a 9 to 5 type of job. It's anything but.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Madison, I know you told me too earlier tonight that you're interested in adolescent medicine.
Yes.
So I wonder if you can tell me along your journey, what have been some of those fundamental experiences or those milestones that have really impacted or touched you in your education?
Yeah, of course. So I think for me, I'm really interested in adolescent medicine because I myself grew up as a patient. Being diagnosed from an early age with an autoimmune disease, I have had a lot of experience being a patient in the medical field. And for me, adolescence is special because I'm interested in that transition care zone. So helping people who have been diagnosed as a child or as a teenager transition through college and through that age group and learning how to be their own advocate, I think is really essential. And I think with my time here at Rockford, I've seen that be done through multiple avenues, whether it's in family medicine clinic, pediatrics, or even in internal medicine. I think a lot of skills can be transferable and applied no matter what discipline you're working with.
Right. Right. And I know too on the tour we saw a lot of interesting tools, the robot dummies, for instance, the digital cadaver table, things like that. So thinking back to some of those pieces on the tour, how have those impacted your ability to learn your practice?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Well, I was a student during COVID-19. I actually started in 2020, and my experience is a little different than the current students who utilize it a lot more than I did when our first year was mostly online. But in my experience running either a mock code or a patient who is not doing well with the mannequins, or even teaching medical students how to do physical exams and even taking a history on a patient myself in that clinical skills center, I think it greatly enriches our education. I think it provides an experience for us to train in a safe environment in which we can make decisions, practice those skills before we get to work with actual patients. And so we come into those clinical scenarios in our third year much more prepared and much more confident in our own skills due to these resources that we have to utilize and that are built into our curriculum.
So I wonder if you could tell us too a little bit about what drew you to Rockford and how you think your experience here is going to carry forth with what you do beyond.
Yeah, of course. So I initially developed a love for the Rockford campus when I visited here as a senior in college. I met someone from recruitment and came and visited, and then also came on my day for my interview. And I really saw a supportive community who really cared, not just in the students, but also in the faculty. I saw students who wanted each other to succeed and do well, who shared resources, which was important to me because I believe that as a student, we're all going to be taking care of patients, and we can make each other the best doctors we can be to really further patient care. But then on top of that, I think the faculty are generally very supportive. And I saw that when I came and visited, but I've also lived that now. I could name a dozen people here who have really helped me get through that experience, whether it was Dean Richards, Dean Collado over there, Stephanie Williams, Dr. Webb, just it's endless the people who have supported me and made it possible for me to get here. And I think that's a testament to this campus and the culture it's built. And I think how I take this experience moving forward is really that appreciation of community and that culture that is important to make me thrive as a student. But I also think because they are so supportive of our passions and our ideas, that it's allowed me to build and cultivate skills in medical education, which is something I am passionate about. And I know that I can pursue that now more confidently in the future. Now that I've been a peer educator, I've led projects educating my classmates about disability, and even designed an elective for myself where I'm working in that clinical skills center you all visited, designing an actual standardized patient encounter that students will do in the spring.
Oh, so it sounds like you've had a really incredible experience here at the University of Illinois College of Medicine.
Yes, I've definitely been involved.
Was there anything else that you'd like to share with us, or any other highlights that you'd like for us to know about?
Yeah, I think there are many opportunities at this campus. I think I bring one unique perspective. I can't speak to the rural experience here, but I know my friends have had excellent opportunities in their different clinical sites or the resources that our school can bring. And I know Dean Stagnero Green can probably speak more to those opportunities and how they will expand more in the future.
Great. Well, Madison, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
Yes, lovely. Nice speaking with you all.
Thank you for joining us.
So Dean Stagnero Green, research is another big part of things that are happening here on campus. I know speaking with some of the professors this evening, they told us a little bit about some of their work. Can you give us an idea of some of the exciting kind of research that's going on campus right now?
Well, sure. Let me put it in perspective. Medical schools do a variety of things. People think the core mission, which is one of our core missions, is to train the next generation of students, which clearly is one of our key functions, but it's not our only function. The other functions include research, clinical care, and community service. And so I'll talk a little bit about research. And what we do here on our campus and is done around the country at medical schools is to figure out ways to improve people's health, to either prevent disease, to cure disease, make diseases livable that we can't cure at this point, or even help people as they go to the final stages of their life. So we do a whole variety of research on our campus. I'll give one example which I think has made this campus and Rockford known throughout the world, and that has to do with the Shingrix vaccine. Shingles is a disease that many of you probably heard about. It occurs in 1 of 3 people over the age of 50. And what it is a reactivation of the chicken pox that we had when we were kids. And the chicken pox virus sits in our nervous system for decades. And as we get older and our immune system changes, it could reactivate as an exceedingly painful type of rash that occurs on different parts of the body. People who have it talk about it as being excruciating. In the past, it was a cause of suicide among individuals because it was a pain that wouldn't go away. It's what we call intractable. It affects their quality of life. If it went on their face as a band, it can cause blindness. And we had a researcher who worked here and spent 30 years of his life developing a vaccine. Spent about 10 to 15 years here in Rockford, and developed a vaccine for shingles, which is exceedingly effective in preventing someone from getting shingles. That vaccine is now recommended by the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, for every adult over the age of 50 in the United States, and it's used throughout the world. So if you think about it, there's only so many vaccines that have been developed
Wow.
over the decades of medicine, and one of the key vaccines was developed right here. There are other areas of research we're doing in vaccine development. We're doing research in cancer. We're doing research in various community issues such as obesity, smoking prevention. All these different areas go on by faculty who work at the medical school, and then our students, like Madison, get involved in that research and get exposed to it. So it teaches them how to do research if and when they want to make that a part of their professional career.
That is impressive.
So I know we've touched on it in a few ways already, but one additional facet of the college here is the rural medicine program. I wonder if you can share with us a little bit about some of the ways that this program works and how it touches the greater Rockford community.
Well, it's very appropriate because today's National Rural Health Day.
That's right.
So why do we care? Why is rural health talked about as opposed to urban care? There's not an urban care day, but there's a National Rural Health Care Day. And the reason for that is that there is a marked difference in the health of the citizens of Illinois who live in rural areas versus those who live in suburban or urban areas. About 20% of our population in Illinois live in rural areas. Those individuals tend to be older, tend to be poorer, less well insured, have increased rates of smoking, hypertension, obesity, heart disease, drug abuse, depression, suicide. And if you take a look and you put that all together, their lifespan is on average between 3 to 7 years shorter than someone who doesn't live in the rural area.
Wow.
And one of the major problems about rural health care is that there's a lack of sufficient number of healthcare professionals. There's a lack of physicians. There's a lack of dentists, of social workers, public health officials. 30 years ago, we started a program on this campus where we recruit individuals from rural areas in Illinois. They come here to Rockford. They study over the 4 years. They then do their residency and maybe a fellowship afterwards. And many of them then go back to their rural communities. They come with the idea that they know there is a need to work in rural Illinois. And they come with a commitment. It's not a legal commitment. It's not a financial commitment. It's a personal commitment, almost a moral and social commitment that they're going to go through their training and go back to those areas and serve the community. And half of our students who come into Rockford are individuals who go through this rural medicine program.
What percent of those students do you think actually end up in their community or a similar community?
About 60%. And if you take a look at the numbers nationally, that's higher than any other program in the country.
To what extent are those students then coming back and impacting this community or the rural communities around Rockford?
We've had over 400 graduates in the program, and 200 plus of those students are now physicians working in Illinois. They could be in Winnebago County. Many of them are in central and southern Illinois, in areas that are considered health care shortage areas that are desperately in need of physicians.
As I understand, too, talking with Hannah Hinkle, who runs some of the medical program there, it sounds like this is a concept or an approach to medicine that can go all around the world.
Well, it can. There hasn't been much success nationally in terms of getting people to go rural and to practice in rural areas. And the studies and the science of it have pretty much shown that it's very hard to take someone who was born in Chicago, lived in Chicago, and to expect them after all their training to live in a rural area. It's foreign to them. It's not what they feel comfortable. And so what you need to do is you need to grow, what we call grow your own. So we need to go out to the communities where the rural students are that have the abilities to go to medical school and the commitment to come back. And so that's been our secret sauce of moving this forward.
Wow. And speaking of moving forward, from what it sounds like, the program is set to really grow. You have some exciting expansion opportunities that are in the works right now.
Well, we have some exciting plans. About 4 or 5 years ago, thinking about what's the next step for our rural programs, we focused on the fact that not only is there a lack of physicians in rural areas, sufficient number of physicians, but there are areas in rural Illinois where there are no obstetricians within an hour or two drive, where there's not enough dentists, there's not enough social workers, there's not enough public health officials. And what our hope is to expand our program here in the next 5 years maybe, where we can build a new building. And as you walk out, you'll see it on your left, a model of it. It's a $100 million building. And the goal is to bring a college of dentistry, a college of social work, a college of public health, and I'm missing one. One other one that I mentioned before, I can't pull. What's that? No, not psych. That's okay, I'll get back to it. Allied health maybe is what I probably didn't go to. And to have those colleges that are based in Chicago have branch campuses here in Rockford so we could train the next generation of healthcare professionals in all of those areas. Many of them will populate rural areas, and many of them will stay here in Rockford. And my guess is that many of you in this audience have been taken care of by individuals who either were medical students here, residents here, or on our faculty. I would dare say that the vast majority of you have interacted with those individuals.
Now, you raise an interesting fact, the fact that a lot of the faculty here also work in the community. That's one of the pillars of the school since its founding 50 years ago. Can you tell me a little bit about what advantage that has for your students and how that also impacts the broader medical community here in Rockford?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a very different system. Where I did my training in New York City at Mount Sinai, there were hundreds of physicians who worked full-time at the medical school, and they provided the vast majority of the training. But the vast majority of training here in a community medical school doesn't happen by our full-time faculty. It happens with our physicians who work at our 3 large hospitals, who work at FQHCs, Crusader, Federally Qualified Healthcare Centers, who work at Rosecrance, and who work at various practices throughout our city and Rockford. This gives our students an unusual opportunity to work with seasoned clinicians, even as 3rd and 4th year students. And therefore, they get a sense of what medicine is really like in practice. They get more hands-on opportunity. And therefore, when they go into their residencies, which is their next stage of training, we hear that they're better prepared than the vast majority of students at other medical schools because they've had more opportunities.
How prevalent is that among medical schools, that model?
So I can't give you exact numbers. I would say the vast majority of schools are more the Mount Sinai model than the Rockford model. But and each medical school, such as University of Illinois College of Medicine, some medical schools have 3 campuses. So we have Chicago, Rockford, Peoria as part of our College of Medicine. Chicago is urban training. Peoria and Rockford is more suburban, with Rockford even being more rural. I'd say maybe 20% of the schools, but I'm really just guessing on that.
Okay.
It's a minority.
But I've also heard that the medical students are better trained through the system that you have here.
Well, that's our bias. I think by the time individuals get through their medical training and you do 4 years of medicine, 3 to 7 years of residency, no matter where you do it, you're going to be really well trained. You're spending an incredible amount of time getting to the point of a level of proficiency and competency where you can go out and take care of patients.
What do you think it brings to the broader Rockford medical community that these students are out there in the community working and having these experiences?
Well, it brings a whole variety of things, but I'll share one perspective, which is that many physicians who finish their training and think about where they're going to go to practice want to go to practice in an area where there's similarities to how they were trained. And the one thing they're looking for more than anything else is to be involved in education, to start training that next generation of physicians. And so one of the things that I think all of the hospitals in Rockford, as well as Crusader, the FQHC, the private practices, Rosecrans find, is as physicians are looking to come to Rockford, the fact that there's a medical school here and that they will be allowed to be part of the faculty. We want them to be part of the faculty. We want them to be involved in our school and training our students, and they want to be involved in that because that's the model they know, and that's giving to the next generation. So I think of all the impact that it has on the Rockford community, one that's maybe least understood but potentially most important is how it's a draw to bring physicians into the area.
So you really see that as being a measure of attracting physicians to want to be here in Rockford because they can teach, they can practice, they can really do it all.
Well, that's correct.
So of course you talk about impact. And I know about 7 years ago the school underwent a study to understand better the aspect of economic impact upon the greater Rockford area. That research back in 2016 showed that the school affects Rockford somewhere to the tune of $58.2 million. That's a big number. That affected things like jobs, students' living expenses, research going on campus. And what other kind of ways do you think the school is impacting Rockford's economy?
I think it affects the economy in a whole variety of ways. It affects it by not only having the students living here, they live out in the community. We don't have dormitories. They live in our neighborhoods. They bring their families here. They end up practicing here. We have hundreds of individuals who are on our staff and as faculty. And then they impact our community in other ways. So for example, when you think about COVID-19 and the years where we all suffered through the ravages of COVID and the inability to go out and to work or to just enjoy life, one of the limiting factors was the ability to get a test and to get results in a timely fashion. Many of you probably recall waiting 2 to 7 days before you'd find out if you were COVID positive or not. We had set up a testing center here where over those 2 years we tested 70,000 individuals who came to our community. I think some of them were repeats, but we did 70,000 tests, and we did about 400,000 laboratory results. So we had specimens sent to us from all over the county. We got all those results within 24 hours. So no one who got tested had to wait more than 24 hours for their results. And that allowed people to go back to their community, back to their lives. So there's so many different ways we're impacting the community. We have a program called the Merit Program, which evaluates children who were suspected of child abuse and child neglect, and both advocate for those children and work with those children. We work closely with the mayor and the city and the Family Peace Center, which I think many people in this room probably have heard about. Mm-hmm. So there are direct ways that we affect the economy through literally by being here and the money that's spent by the students, the staff, and the faculty. We affect the economy by the programs we run. We affect the economy by the grants we bring in a couple $1 million a year of federal funds for the research that we're doing. So it's a whole variety of ways.
I'm amazed at all of the different ways that the school touches the community, just all the different things that we've discussed so far tonight. What do you think people would be most surprised to understand about the school?
Well, I think the thing they might be most surprised is about the shingles vaccine. I think that, to me, that was one of the greatest findings of the University of Illinois, not just the College of Medicine, but the whole University of Illinois. I mean, how many things could be more impactful than being able to prevent such a debilitating disease? And there are ongoing studies right now to treat a couple of other diseases. One in particular is called lymphatic filariasis. Most people haven't heard of it, but you've probably seen the pictures of people with elephantiasis, the very large legs, which are so debilitating and affect tens of millions of people around the world, with 1 billion people being potentially exposed to it. We're working on a vaccine right now that potentially could prevent anyone from getting that disease, or most people from getting that disease in the future. Mm-hmm. So our impact isn't just within the Rockford community, within Winnebago County, within the state of Illinois, but it truly is a global impact.
And all from right here in Rockford.
Right here from Rockford.
All right. So I'd like to take a minute and kind of look in our crystal ball, if you will.
Sure.
So let's peer into the future a little bit here. Your students are entering the world, and certainly the healthcare world, at a very interesting time. Madison talked about the impact of the pandemic on her and her career. Certainly we know that the baby boomer generation is hitting retirement age and starting to need more of those healthcare services. And of course, plenty of other challenges in the world right now. Students like Madison and the other students that are here right now, what kind of challenges do you expect that they might face during their careers?
Well, I'd like to go back to my training a little bit because I think part of the message is that all of our medical careers have just been fascinating and challenging, and things move forward at a pace that you couldn't imagine. So, for example, when I did my training, and I was in medical school from 1979 to 1983, 1981 is when the AIDS epidemic first came out. And I remember I worked as a nurse's aide in the intensive care unit at Mount Sinai, and we had 2 of the first patients in the world who had HIV. Of course, we didn't know it was HIV/AIDS at that point. It was some sort of weird immunologic disease that was deadly. And for the next 10 years or 15 years of my career, we treated, and I was involved in treating, hundreds of individuals with AIDS. And we knew as soon as we made that diagnosis, even before we knew what the HIV virus was, that it was a death sentence. If someone came in with a certain type of cancer, it's called Kaposi sarcoma, or a certain type of pneumonia called pneumocystis, that they had this disease, this immune deficiency disease. And we knew that within a couple of years, they were going to die, and there was nothing that we could do about it. So fast forward 40 years in my career, we don't have a vaccine yet for AIDS, but students like Madison growing up think about AIDS as a chronic disease. People live for decades with AIDS. And if you think about COVID-19, within a year, we developed a vaccine. So what do I think the challenges for people like Madison are going to be? I think that medicine will continue to evolve and change so rapidly that the challenge is to keep up and to focus in on the medicine, focus in on that personal relationship with patients, be open to the new things that are available, because it's very easy for anyone, once they get into the area, to focus on their old ways. But one of the beauties about medicine is that it's ever evolving and you're ever learning. Every week I get my New England Journal of Medicine, which is probably the highlight journal for clinicians. And I open that excitedly because all of a sudden there's new treatments for diseases I thought could never be treated. One of the recent things coming out, which to me is just amazing, is a potential cure for sickle cell disease. Sickle cell is a genetic disease. People who have it, if they have, I was going to call it the more severe, if they have full-blown sickle disease, those individuals have a very difficult life. They have painful crises throughout their lives. They have a shorter lifespan. They are constantly facing medical challenges that most of us can't even imagine. There's a genetic therapy that's out there that a company is moving forward that can cure this disease. I would never have imagined in my career that you can cure sickle cell. I never imagined you could cure type 1 diabetes. Now, most people with type 1 diabetes don't get cured because there's not enough resources, there's not enough of the pancreases to treat the individuals, but yet we have potential ways that one day type 1, and I think it's going to be in Madison's career, that type 1 diabetes will be cured. It'll be disease of the past. And to think about those type of medical breakthroughs and to put it in perspective, almost 100 years ago, I think it was in 1922, Banting and Best first discovered insulin in Toronto, Canada. So 100 years ago, if you were born 101 years ago and you developed type 1 diabetes, you were going to die. There was nothing that could be done to save you. With the discovery of insulin, it was impure, it had its complications. Initially, the insulin used in the US market was made from pigs and from cows. Now it's genetically engineered. But it took a disease that had 100% mortality and a couple years drove it down to below 10%. So the changes that are occurring in medicine are so rapid and so dramatic and so remarkable that she'll have a fantastic career. There'll be challenges. Where does artificial intelligence come in? Where does computers fit in? How can you keep up with the amount of new knowledge that's coming through? I think this will all be some of the challenges that our profession is going to face. How do you deal with the economics of medicine? It's becoming an ever-increasing part of our GDP. So how do you deal with issues of inequity? Tons of challenges, but wonderful opportunities.
How do you choose the medical research that the school will pursue?
Oh. I don't know if I choose or they choose us. I'm trying to figure out which way to answer it. So I would say here in the Rockford campus, when I got here, there were certain areas of research, basic science and cancer, in vaccine development, that we wanted to expand and continue and support. There are new areas in community medicine that we felt we had the opportunities to make a difference. We're looking to expand the area of child abuse research because we see 400 kids a year who are suspected or in fact have been abused. And we can help develop ways to identify those children, to help prevent child abuse, to talk about working with the families and how best to keep a family intact but decrease the chance of abuse. So in some ways, it was historical, and in other ways, it's where are the opportunities?
All right, so I think after tonight, we all feel better educated. We all have a much better idea of what's going on here at the school. But I think you could still argue or say that it's still a best-kept secret for a lot of reasons. What would you like people of Rockford and of Northern Illinois to know about the school and its work in the community?
So we've worked really hard to change that perception of one of the best-kept secrets. And I think we've made a lot of progress. And so I just want to tell one or two stories, and then I'll get back to your question. So when I first moved here 10 years ago, my wife and I went to the IHOP, the International House of Pancakes, by Route 90. And a very nice young woman served us. And I asked her a question about Rockford. And she goes, oh, you must be new to the community. You know, where do you work? And I said, well, I work at the medical school. And her face clouded over. And she goes, I'm sorry, sir. We don't have a medical school here. And I said, well, it turns out that you do, because I've worked there for the last 3 weeks. So go ask some other people. And so she went to ask her coworkers and the chef. Came back, said, no. There's no medical school. So that started me on a project to get the word out. And I and my colleagues have spent enormous amount of time, effort, and energy being involved in the community, speaking to the community, making people aware of what we do. 5 years ago, I went to a fast food place with my wife, and there was a couple there, and she looks at me, she goes, sir, she goes, you look very familiar. She goes, are you on TV? I looked at her, I smiled, I said, Brad Pitt. And she shook her head. But last month, my wife, Doreen, and I went to Blaine's Farm and Fleet, and we're getting holiday presents for our kids. And the woman behind the counter, looked at me. She's staring at me, and trying to figure out, something going on. She goes, I know you. I don't know this woman. She goes, I know you. She goes, you're the dean. You're Dr. Stegnaro Green. So we're getting the word out. And what do I want our community to know? I want you to know that we work here under the philosophy that we're here to serve our community, to prove the health and well-being of people who live in Rockford and Winnebago County and the state of Illinois. And if it's working with child abuse patients, if it's working with domestic violence, if it's training physicians to move things forward, if it's taking a lead in COVID, that's what this school is all about, because we're a state medical school, and that's our mission.
And you have raised the level of visibility. We're just out to help that.
I'm sorry?
You have raised the level of visibility. We're just out to help.
Well, we appreciate
process.
that. We still have work to do. No question about it.
We're on your team.
But even within the last month, I've given talks at 3 different groups I've never even heard of, people who graciously invite me into their homes or their organizations, and we have conversations just like this.
Well, this conversation will become a major article in the upcoming issue that Chris is going to be heavily involved in. And, we'll help get the word out to tens of thousands of people.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate that.
No, and Dr. Stegnaro Green, we thank you for your time today and for sharing with us. We appreciate the conversation we've had and the chance we've had to learn a little bit more about the school this evening.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We're very proud. I'm very proud of the work we do here and of the people who work here and the students who train, the staff and the faculty. I think the community, should feel that we are here to be part of you and to work together just to help us move forward.
That's right. Great. Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. So now at this point, we'll start our Q&A session. We'll open up the floor for any questions you folks might have. Just so you know, the microphones that are in front of you, you can use to speak. You'll have to push down and hold the button while you speak, and then once you take your finger off, then it'll stop feeding your mic. So are there any questions that anybody has?
Are the ones which we put on the cards, are they going to be talked about?
We have those too, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep, I have 2 cards here, and some folks submitted questions in advance. We can use one of those to get us started too.
Sure.
I think these questions are both very similar in a sense. One says, what effort is the school making to reaffirm and to expand its commitment to developing primary physicians? And then someone else asked that recent reports show a lack of pediatric care in hospitals.
Yep.
And how are you helping to address shortages along those lines?
Yeah, so they're both really good questions. There's a broader answer and a more concise answer. The broader answer is there's a lack of physicians in almost every specialty in medicine at this point, especially once you move out of urban areas. One of those areas in particular that Rockford is facing is an insufficient number of pediatricians. I think we also don't have enough obstetricians at this point in time. So when someone comes into medical school, they are free to choose any specialty that they want. They will spend 4 years in training, and after 4 years of training, they will then decide if they want to go into pediatrics or if they want to go into plastic surgery. And that's a choice that students have, and they apply to residency programs to match there. It turns out by having our rural medicine program, it attracts individuals who have a particular passion for going into primary care, be it pediatrics, internal medicine, obstetrics, gynecology, family medicine. We also, in our programs, have, for the non-RMed students, which are half the students, they get tremendous exposure to all of these areas. Overall, our school has a higher percentage of individuals who go into those primary care areas. However, we're running up against market forces. And the market forces is that individuals who go into primary care can make half the money of individuals who go into other fields. Students who go to medical school, let's say they go straight from college from 22 to 26, they will incur an average debt of $230,000. And they live very modestly. They then go into their residency programs, which could be from 3 to 7 years, and they make a good salary, but not enough salary to pay for that debt and simultaneously develop a family, buy a house, move forward with the American dream. Eventually, those individuals will have that fiscal freedom as they move forward in their 30s and maybe early 40s. But it's a tremendous commitment on the part of the students to go into medicine to begin with. I, for example, didn't finish my training till I was 32. You know, at that point, many people had been working for over a decade. I thought I had a tremendous debt load when I graduated. It was $25,000. It's like a mere pittance, you know, in comparison. But when students are faced with debt loads, some of them for $300,000 or $400,000, it's hard to convince them to go into primary care fields where it's going to be difficult for them to carry that financial burden and also move forward with their lives. So it's all these challenges going on simultaneously.
You raise an interesting question there, too, about the cost or the financial burden of education. Are there efforts that the school is able to make to help lower that burden on behalf of the students?
Yeah, there are tremendous efforts going on. The tuition at our College of Medicine over the last 7 years, last 5 years has gone up either 0% or 2%. But we're also one of the higher or more expensive public medical schools. We're working hard to raise scholarship dollars. Sometimes it's hard to raise scholarship dollars for medical students because people think that all physicians are rich. Medical students are not rich, and they have a heavy burden. And when they do their training in the residency, it used to be we would work 80 to 100 hours a week. Nowadays, that's illegal. You can't work more than 80 hours a week. That still sounds to most people pretty excessive. That sounds pretty good to me. I used to have to do 36-hour shifts, which, again, now we don't do any longer. So I think people are looking at it from all different perspectives. On top of that, when you go out into the world, if you want to go into primary care, since there's not a sufficient number of primary care physicians, there are many hospitals will give you loan repayment programs. So for every year that you work at that hospital, they will pay off another $30,000 to $50,000 of that $250,000 nut that you're carrying. So it's all these things happening simultaneously.
Amazing. Well, we have another question here. Someone says that they see a lot of advertisements about, I want to make sure I'm reading this right, latoplasty, and they're wondering if you can explain how it's done.
I don't know what lapoplasty is. It might be laparoscopy.
They might be meaning laparoscopic surgery.
I'm sorry?
They might be meaning laparoscopic surgery.
Laparoscopic surgery, is that what the question
No,
is?
it's my question. I think it's about a bunion and they advertise on television.
For bunions?
Yes,
I'm not familiar with
yeah,
it.
okay,
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to check. I'm not familiar with the term.
okay. It's advertised a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't watch very much TV, so, but I've never heard the term.
All right. And someone else is wondering, where are the rural clinics now? I assume that's related to
The rural medicine program?
rural medicine.
Oh, they're all throughout the state. In western Illinois, central, south. We have connections with 50 hospitals, another 40 practices. So if we had a map in front of us, you would see that it's just distributed throughout the state of Illinois.
Really in every corner and every area.
And I think our graduates have not populated every one of the 102 counties, but the vast majority.
Sure. All right. Are there any other questions out there?
I have one. Oh, that's loud.
Yeah.
Over the course of your career, speaking to the fact that there's a shortage of medical physicians and such, have you seen a decline in the schools of enrollment?
No, just the opposite. And I'll tell you, the medical societies are not very good at predicting whether we have too many or too few physicians. I was talking with someone earlier that in the 1990s, the medical associations thought there were going to be too many physicians. And the recommendations at that point were to decrease the enrollment at each school and for some schools to close. That really didn't happen, but from the 1980s, 1990s, there was almost no medical school that opened up. Since the turn of the century, there probably have been 35 new medical schools that have opened and about 20 new osteopath schools that are opening. And the enrollment, the annual enrollment of students into medical school has gone from 16,000 a year to about 21,000. So it has increased, but still felt to be insufficient. Oh, so why? So there's lots of reasons. One is that physicians used to work till they dropped, right? People, you think of the old family physician who in the 70s and 80s continued to work. Physicians are retiring for a whole variety of reasons. Some of my colleagues are retiring. I think they're in the prime of their career, but they're ready, and I can understand that you have tremendous sacrifices as a physician, and they want to be able to do different things in their lives. The average lifespan is increasing. The number of people who are moving into the elderly are increasing. The number of people who are working part-time as physicians are increasing. And so all of these things have put tremendous pressure on the system.
I work for a couple of doctors, and one thing I notice in their occupations is that the insurance rates are so different depending on what particular field they are involved with. Has there been any improvement in that or not?
Moderate. I would say there's a tremendous discrepancy between what a primary care physician would make and a surgeon would make, even if they do the same number of hours. Procedure-oriented specialties garner much higher wages, much higher reimbursement. There's been lots of talk in Congress over the years to try and decrease that differential. I would say only mild efficacy or mild improvements been made. Not enough to make a meaningful difference. How do I feel about hospitalists? First, well, let me explain what a hospitalist is. And so there's been an evolution. When I finished my training, there was no such thing as a hospitalist. So a physician, so if I had a physician a patient I was taking care of, and that patient needed to be hospitalized, I would be responsible for that patient's care. I would go in the morning and see the patient. If there were problems, I'd be contacted by the team, and then I might go back that evening, if need be, to see the patient again. Over the years, that was felt to be a very inefficient system, that not enough care was being given to the patient, and also that because of the lack of someone there constantly, the length of stay, the amount of time that person had to spend in the hospital was too long. So hospitals went to a hospitalist type model where there are now physicians, and they do it in shifts, but they're there 24/7. And so when you get admitted to a hospital, if you were my patient, you would then be treated by the hospitalist and not by me. Hopefully the hospitalist would talk with me, there'd be communication, and after you get discharged, you'd go back to whoever your physician was. How do I feel about hospitalists? Probably mixed. I think the model of having someone there 24/7, 365, is a great concept and probably improves the quality of, or at least the pace of care that individual gets. I think what's lost is that personal touch, that my physician is taking care of me. I think what's lost is the hospitals can't have the same sense of a patient that I would have if I took care of them for 5 to 25 years. And then it becomes somewhat disjointed when they come back to the practice. Probably would like to see some combination of hospitalist and the physician keeping up with the patient while they're in the hospital. I think that would be a better model.
How do you think that could work?
I don't know. I haven't given it enough thought. No one's asked me. But I think the loss of that continuity is detrimental.
Yeah, I spent some time in the hospital not too many years ago. So I got to experience that system.
Yep.
And that also there's a trust of the patient. You have
Sure.
this person you don't know
Yep.
that's coming in and trying to tell you what's wrong with you. And you don't know them, they don't know you. There's that gap can be hard to
Well, that
span.
gap can be very hard. You don't know, a person who comes into the hospital and they're confused, and let's say that person's 75. Well, how does the hospitalist know if that's the normal status of that patient or something
Yeah.
acutely happened in the last 12 hours?
Right.
Whereas if I was taking care of the patient, I'd come in and I'd see Mr. or Miss X, and I would know that patient. So, yeah, I think there is a lot lost. I think it's a two-edged sword.
Hmm. I can see the side of having somebody's on that staff in that hospital all the time to be able to provide care, especially if something traumatic happens.
Hmm.
Maybe you'll solve that.
Maybe. I think there's lots of possible solutions. Again, I just haven't focused on that as one of the issues. But when I think about the hospitalist and that continuity, I think the model could be better. Sure, it's a question of trust. You want to press the button? You have a button right in front of you. And then speak into the mic, and everyone will hear you.
I'm usually loud enough, but I'm curious what you've built in recent years into the curriculum to deal with the change in mix of students relative to cultural differences. We have a number of foreign trained students who come for residencies or even primary medical school. And cultural differences create some trauma in the, particularly the elderly patients in the hospital, simply because of the difference in the way the personal interaction occurs. What have you added into the curriculum to deal with that?
Yeah, we've actually added a lot in terms of how to deal with the interpersonal aspects of treating patients. We do it both through presentations, we do it through mock interviews, like in the standardized patient center that you probably have seen if you took the tour. We do it through discussions on rounds. What's interesting is the feedback that I hear is that students and residents feel that they know that already, right? They don't need to learn that. But what I hear from the patients is they really do need to learn it. So the question is how to do it in such a way to make it effective and to get through that boundary. Because everyone wants to believe that they're not biased, and everyone wants to believe that they would be sensitive to an individual from another culture, and everyone would like to believe that they're going to treat each person like their grandparent. But we hear from the patients that's not true. And so besides having our discussions with the students and residents and doing those mock type of interactions, I think it's the personal stories that really make a difference. So someone who comes in and talks about how they had an interaction, a patient who comes in front of a group of students, and I had this interaction at the hospital where someone came in and because I was elderly, they thought that I was not a full faculty. So instead of talking to me, they talked to my daughter. And how insulting the person felt that was, that they would ask a question, you would answer, but then they would turn to the daughter. And those type of things, I think you could learn to an extent by discussing it, but you could learn even more by having those examples that are so poignant and so important. So I think it's a hard thing to teach, to be really honest. And we do spend a fair amount of time. How effective we are, I don't quite know the answer. It was something that we never got taught when I was a medical student, for sure. So there's a sensitivity there. The question is, how can we both be most effective?
Sounds so. There's
Maybe
another
take one last question.
You had the COVID outbreak.
Go ahead.
You determined that this would be a testing site for the community. Did that come naturally? Or did you have some special way of attracting the populace to come here for testing?
Sure. So it started out philosophically. One of the reasons why I came to Rockford is I wanted to be at a medical school that was part of a community and responsive to the community. So as COVID occurred, I think medical professions around the country wanted to be involved. Initially, I don't know if it was the mayor or the director of public health reached out to us and asked if they could use our facility for testing for the National Guard. And I don't know if any of you remember, but we had the National Guard here for I don't know how many months. But when the National Guard was leaving and there was talk about what's next, I'm trying to remember the steps. I know we stood up and offered to be a testing site. At the same time, the University of Illinois developed the saliva, the spit test, and we were able to work with the university to become not only a testing site to bring people in, but to also run the specimens. And from my perspective, it was a no-brainer. I mean, that's what we're here for. You know, if a college of medicine within a community can't take care of our population during a global epidemic, then why are we here, right? So it was an easy decision, and I was glad we were able to do it. I was sorry when we had to close down, because we closed down a little bit earlier than what I've liked, but there were, I don't know what I would call it, there were governmental regulations that forced it to move to another site.
It seemed to me like it's a natural at the time.
It-
The community and the attraction that you have with U of I Medical School, let's say, I thought, that I want to go through for
And, you know, of the 68, 70,000 people who came through, we had one complaint. Only one complaint, and that was a person who either tested positive one day, went somewhere else and tested negative, or the reverse. And I don't even think that was a problem with our lab. You know, that could happen with anybody. But we got dozens and dozens of individuals, you know, expressing their appreciation.
it was a great service at the time because it calmed down the population in a crisis.
Yeah, well, we were proud to do it, and you know, at points we were a little bit strained during the highest frequency of people testing. I think we had over 1,000 a day, and I remember stopping what I was doing, and I was right at that front desk, and I was helping to check people in, and you know, we got it done, and our people stood up. And some of them were afraid, right? Because you know, the people who are getting tested are people who think they have COVID. So that,
Unknown pathway at the time.
well, even when it was a known pathway, you know that you're at risk. But You know, I think that's what you go into medicine for, is to serve the population. So I was really happy I was happy in the sense we could help during a time of crisis. Probably a good way to end.
That's it. That is.
Dean, your leadership of the school, I think, is impressive.
Thank you.
What you're doing in so many facets. We have got several stories from this that we're going to be able to write about that I think you'll all
Thank you, I
find
appreciate that.
fascinating. And join me in thanking the Dean and Chris for an insightful evening.
Well, thank you all for coming out.